Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very warm welcome to yet another episode of the Coffee Table. Natural disasters are increasing globally day by day, and a major part is being played by the changing climate, which is making of human beings. But the natural disasters they stem from climate change are such that we can do something about them. We can do mitigation efforts and other things. And other natural disasters like earthquake, also we can take some mitigation, like building resilient infrastructures, better construction. They are not more prone to earthquakes. Same with floods and landslides, which are mountain areas related to the changing climate, because the glaciers are melting, because there are unprecedented amount of water in the bodies of waters which they are not used to it, and the construction on the vulnerable sites and all other things. So there are organizations globally, they are performing their work and doing something about it. Today we have invited a very important person from one such organization which is very busy at a place which is joining of three large mountain ranges, Karakoram, Himalayas and the Hindu Kush. We have today with us the Director General of ICIMOD, David Molden. David, very warm welcome.
Thank you very much.
Say something about it. What are you doing to mitigate and sort of, if not prevent, then lessen the disaster, human migration and all?
Yeah, just to back up a little bit. So our organization focuses very much on mountains, like you were saying, right. The three great mountain ranges plus the Tibetan Plateau on the north side. Now, what first is a few things. One is these mountain areas are shared between several countries, right? And
transboundaries.
I would put it rather a resource that is shared. and
not divided.
Exactly, right. Think of it in that positive,
in a different spirit.
In that light. And then second, probably mountain issues in the region are underappreciated, say, compared to plains, right? And there are many reasons for that. Less people live in mountains, typically isolated environments. But on the other hand, they are supplying a lot of resources downstream. So the idea of our institute is really to focus on mountain areas, bring the attention they need. The third is there's a lot of innovation in mountain areas. So if we can share knowledge between the countries, we can really move forward in helping mountain people. And then the last point, what you touched on, is mountain areas are highly vulnerable to disasters, right? And part of it is just the ecology, the topography, but in addition to that, the remoteness. So when disaster strikes, it's hard to get to. So if you think about a flash flood, I was talking about this yesterday, when a flash flood hits the plains, right, it's moving slowly, spreading out. If it comes in the mountains, it hits. Wow, right down.
Vertical.
Yeah,
surge.
it's a verticality of mountains. So it's a different kind of issues. So anyway, what we recognize is, and you were saying this, that disasters are getting more frequent. So if we can share knowledge across countries, across mountain people, perhaps we can figure out some of the solutions as we're moving forward. So one thing I wanted to recognize too, or what is a disaster? It's usually has to do with people, right? When people get killed or they lose
life
and property. But things like landslides, earthquakes, flood, high river levels, that's happened here forever, right? As far as we know. But it's that interaction with people in the environment that makes a difference. So we have two things happening in parallel. We have an increasing population. That's one, and people getting close to nature. And then secondly, climate change is actually increasing the occurrence of these natural hazards. Like
taking the earthquake, just keeping it apart. What is the contribution or the volume size component of climate change in disasters?
In disasters, I would, just as a rough number, I'd put it like now at about say 10 or 20%. I'd put the way people are interacting with nature maybe more than 50%.
But the
20% is a
big
lot.
number.
It's a lot.
number.
It's a big number. So what? And what?
I mean, if the 20%, it means the settlements on the peripheries, they will be hit more than 80% sometimes. If
Yeah.
there's an you know what I'm saying? Because it's incremental.
Yeah, but so I think that's what we're seeing a lot in the Pakistan mountains, for example. So here we have, with the glaciers, right? We have two different kinds of phenomena. Either surging down, right, which is quite curious, or retreating, and probably in both cases there's melting water, right, both inside the glacier and sometimes in glacial
Around
lakes. So what we see here is an increase in these glacier lake outburst floods, which get very difficult to get warning on that. And then the other with the climate change, what seems to happen, what I've heard is the shifting patterns of monsoons in the westerlies, right? So the Pakistan mountains are kind of dominated by the westerly type rainfall patterns. But it seems like the monsoon is kind of creeping in, right? Monsoons bring the summer rains. So it's a little bit of a dangerous combination. We have those summer rains combined with glacier melt.
Yeah, 2010, the same happened.
Yeah.
The western current combined with the monsoon,
Yeah.
and that was,
Yeah. So
210.
So that
59, more than 59, I mean, according to very conservative, 59 million acre feet of water went into the Arabian Sea.
Yeah, incredible. So we've got, yeah. So we've got a situation that in
10 times bigger than all the water reservoirs in the country.
Yeah, it just kind of makes your hair rise to think about it. Wow.
Yeah.
So we're indeed living dangerously. So we have, in many ways, some unprecedented events like this that
Bigger than the flood of Noah. Yeah,
I'm not.
actually,
Is it that big?
It was. Yes, it was actually.
Yeah. So it's quite difficult, and sometimes you wonder, gosh, what can you possibly do when these huge natural events happen? And so that really is a challenge. So we have the huge event, but then we also have many of these smaller, yet devastating events, and perhaps in between, there are some things that we have to take care of and we can do about
You're
that.
right.
Yeah.
So that is what is the what amount of input should have been coming from these organizations and the governments, which is not there to lessen the damage and extent of that. I mean, what is the gap between doing and what should have been done?
Yeah. So
Quickly.
actually, I think what governments are getting better at, and even I heard this with Chitral recently, is providing the instantaneous relief, right?
But not mitigation.
But the mitigation side is harder. Number one in these mountain areas is to really is an understanding, a better understanding, right? So if glaciers are melting, if there are indeed water bodies forming inside those glaciers, it's possible if we really go out there and find that information. So you can say, wow, this is a danger zone, right?
Yeah, the glacier has melted from inside.
Yeah, so we're pointing
So there
out
would be a surge. There could be.
it could be a surge and
Glacier burst.
yeah, could be glacier burst. So it's part, and it's what's amazing is a lot of times the communities in those mountains kind of know what's going on. So I believe if we put the community knowledge together with our scientific knowledge, we can much better, get an understanding, predict what might
Although
happen.
you're performing in the region, but you're kind of a globetrotter. Do you understand that the climate change has been accepted, assimilated, and taken as a piece of knowledge by the government? They have realized that the climate change is here and it's a real phenomenon.
Well, but say people will sometimes accept climate change. They say, yes, it's a real problem, but it's not really really
Into their psyche.
into their psyche,
Into
it's
their
not,
bones.
It's not into their bones, right?
Yeah.
They'll, it's more the rhetoric of climate change.
Even at the policy level?
Yeah, well, that's what I find quite frequently. Yes, they'll
Yeah.
accept, but it's not like
Oh,
It-
will happen.
it's
Posterity will take care of
it's
it.
like climate change is a slow phenomenon, and a flood is or an earthquake, you run, right? And what we need to be doing now is more of the running, right? And I hate to say it, but maybe events like what's happening now will, trigger some inspiration. Yes, we have to
Right.
do something now.
Right, so here we take a short break, and after the break, we'll continue our discussion. So please stay with us.
It's diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
Welcome back. In 2005, Pakistan saw a terrible
Yeah.
earthquake in
Yeah.
Kashmir.
Yeah.
100,000 casualties.
Yeah.
And billions of
terrible.
dollars of loss. On the fault line, just a little bit away from the fault line, there was hardly any damage.
Yeah.
And the fault line at most of the places was not wider than 1.5 kilometer.
Yeah.
So it was a sort of a line that went around, and unfortunately that fault line was moving under the major cities, Muzaffarabad, Balakot,
Yeah.
and all the major cities.
Yeah.
So the loss was terrible.
Yeah.
Meaning by that, in urban planning, you could have easily mitigate the effect of any of the expected
Yeah.
earthquake.
Yeah.
You're right now. You're sitting at the fault line. Fault line, the MBT, because of which the earthquake came in Nepal,
Yeah.
passes through Islamabad
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And 4,000 years back, the whole Gandhara Texla civilization perished because of that.
Yeah.
So, do you think that the time has come that awareness or knowledge awareness should be created, people should be through the media, and for that you need to train people, get them sensitized, right?
Of course, of
How?
course. Now, I don't know, it must be human nature, but there's something like after a disaster, our awareness is way high, right? And then it kind
The
of
pain is high when you're stuck.
the pain is high, then it recedes like that, and a few years later we forget, and
Yeah, it becomes
something
flat.
like what is it in human nature? So
Yeah.
somehow we have to keep that awareness level up. So I live in Kathmandu, right? So we just had the earthquake in Kathmandu, and now, in rebuilding, of course, the government says we have to have strict codes, and I'm sure they'll follow it. Right now, they'll follow the strict building codes. Now, 20 years from now, I don't know
Yeah.
whether they'll forget
So
again.
you're talking about mountains and the climate change together,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that is most of the earthquake zone as well.
Yeah.
So why don't you take earthquake, as a congenital twin?
We should, absolutely.
You
We should. So,
As a congenital twin.
yeah, exactly. We should do that. We should say, okay, look, just in general, we have to be prepared for all kinds of disasters, right? So whether it's earthquake, which is not necessarily climate change. Sometimes climate change compounds the impact of earthquakes. But we can use that for sure. The awareness is high right now. So let's get in a whole bunch of other issues at the same time, the floods, the droughts, landslides, and raise awareness. Don't build your house in the danger zone. That's number one.
Yeah.
Build our structures, hydropower, houses, schools, so they can withstand all kinds of shocks, right? And then, of course, it is really working with communities, the heart of communities, so that if something does happen, how can they respond better in the short and long term? And there are ways to work with communities as well. Certainly, what we notice in Nepal, there are some communities that are connected better internally and to the outside world. So they're able to reach out to their people overseas, say, we need help, and they got immediate relief. And there are other communities that just are pretty isolated and not as organized.
Are you
and
doing something
left
to
out.
transfer the global knowledge which is attained on isolated places and collected as a depository to
Yeah.
transfer that to the local people? And I'm saying it for a reason. In 2005, I would see all the time Chinook helicopters flying above, coming from NATO and all that, coming
Yeah.
from Kashmir and
Yeah.
flying. And now I have seen in news similarly in Nepal. So there must be someone, I mean, even in the armed forces, the big armed forces, NATO West in the USA,
Yeah.
and the other, I mean, administration, which has been collecting knowledge as well. And
Yeah.
do you think that is a useful thing, that if you get your hands on to that knowledge bank and make policy and transfer them to the local people?
Of course, that's.
Are you doing that?
That's what we do. Now, always, we can. First, to admit, we can always do a better job, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
huge task.
There's capacity for improvement.
And but indeed, that's what we should be doing. Yes, we're a knowledge organization, so the idea is, what do we learn from these different experience, different actors? Like, it's
Yeah.
a good idea to talk to the helicopter pilots who've seen everything, and we actually did do that a lot. And but to make sure that that message gets down, not just to government but to communities themselves. So actually spreading that message is quite a challenge, but something we need to do. Need to do a lot more of.
And there's another thing on the flood, especially about the climate change. In 2010, according to the estimate, 59 million acre feet of water went to the Arabian Sea.
Yeah.
Have that 20 million acre feet of water been shaved from
Yeah.
the flow,
Yeah.
there would have been no floods. The rivers had the capacity in their beds. I mean, the encroachment in the river bed is there, but why don't you suggest building? I mean, had the Kalabag and the Bunji and the Amir Basha dam been built, there would have been no flood.
Yeah.
No flood at all. And in one flood, the damage was more than the cost of all these dams. Plus, one dam, 7 million acre feet, is
Yeah.
about 2% of the GDP.
Now I'm going to cast a little doubt on your statement, because
All right.
yeah, because I actually think if we do, and I haven't done the calculation here, but I've in similar areas, if we build a dam, it can store some of that, but it's actually surprising. It's usually not the volumes you think. You'd have to have, what happens a lot of times too is, it's the reservoir, it's rainy season, the reservoirs are almost full, then the flood comes, right? And they're full for a reason, because you have to irrigate in monsoon. So you'd almost have to have the reservoirs totally empty to capture that flood water. And then if you look at the volumes, I'm doubtful whether we could have done that.
After climate change, that has changed. Now there's a drought followed by extreme heat.
Yeah.
So if you have, Pakistan can hardly fill the
yeah.
existing dams.
Yeah.
Karbala Dam they can.
But
But then had these structures would be there, the only structure that would be full would have been the last one.
Yeah. I'm doubting the calculations whether
All
it
right.
would really store that much. We should do that.
But the government of GOP says that.
Anyway.
Okay.
I don't have the calculation, but what I will say is the other place that has a lot of storage is the groundwater reserves, and that's where I would pay attention. So there is,
On the groundwater.
In the groundwater.
But
right?
there is one thing more on the dams.
Yeah.
If you have dams, for example, Tarbela Dam, when it started functioning, that was equivalent to the 2% of the GDP.
Yeah.
And given if that remains, which is far less today because the service side
Yeah.
has grown in Pakistan and
Yeah.
the share of the agriculture has dwindled. But even then, if 1% of the GDP means about $3 billion, $3 billion, two dams means 6%, $6 billion a year.
Yeah.
Had that water, the water that went down, forget about the flood damage, the water that we lost to the Arabian Sea was worth more than, 10%, 20,
the water,
12% of the GDP.
Water's,
I mean, you lost about all the debt accumulated in one season. You could have paid back for agriculture. For example, whole of the Nasirabad district, which is
Yeah.
virgin land,
Yeah.
could have come under agriculture.
Yeah. Yeah. So the trick is, anyway, what I
So you suggest dams,
my
big dams.
no, I think you're suggesting.
No,
What my suggestion is look at the whole picture,
All right.
and yes, you have dam storage, and I don't think it's enough. But you also
It's
have
not enough.
You also have tremendous groundwater storage. So it is actually, if you had a plan, how would you manage the flood? I mean, if it was for me, I'd try to get as much as possible spread and into the groundwater, where you already have depletion of the groundwater.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. But the other part, and it was mentioned yesterday, is we also have to recognize that floods have an important component in nature of actually cleansing and supporting biodiversity. So some of that is not that bad that it's going out.
That's very good. The Muncher Lake was cleaned.
Yeah, so it is. We should accept that floods also have a certain value for nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, indeed, on the big ones, if you could store more. But I think it's you have to really be ready for that. I remember the Chinese had big floods on the Yangtze. Then they got a lot better at their reservoir storage, how they would just, forecast the floods, drop the reservoir down, capture a lot. So it requires a lot of, but they also have a lot more reservoir capacity than here. So it's possible. It's a good idea.
Even if what you are suggesting, you manage floods, what you're saying. Even then, for you need a lot of work with the local municipalities. And for example, there should be no construction in the riverbed.
Yeah,
well, you should stop that. The building codes and plans, all that. You need to work for them.
Yeah, what always
on the civil side.
What always amazes me is, and you see this all over the mountains. You have floods and buildings get washed away. 10 or 20 years later, buildings are back, and especially
place.
Well, a lot of time. Well, the one is people, and because it's easier, you build roads along the riverbanks, right?
Yeah.
And then the houses come next to the roads. Then, of course, that's where the flood comes as well too. So that's the planning, the smart planning, and being strict about where you build. That definitely has to come. And same with earthquakes. Just build your house strong. So there's a lot in that regard that can be done to save lives and property.
What is the component of climate change?
In what?
What size? What size? You said 20%, but just a little bit for the layman, for the understanding of the layman. I want you to talk a little bit more on that. To understand that the climate change is a big thing, it's not a small thing.
Yeah.
And climate change 19,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Just because of rise of 2 degrees, the ice age perished. And now we are expecting, if we take the methane discharge as well, which is a problem, which is 25 times more lethal than CO2, then scientists say that could be 4 degrees C, the rise.
Yeah.
So I want you to, as an expert, talk a little bit for the layman for their understanding.
Yeah. Okay, so I said if we look at something like today, a phenomenon today of a flood, okay. So what happens is we get more increase in rainfall, right? And these short-term cloud bursts, right? And that are, let's say 20% more water comes, or but it's this management of floods, the disaster is really how people, if people get in the way, if they're living in the houses, the disaster is their houses are destroyed, their lives are destroyed. But it's the fact that people come and live on the floodplains, don't have the early warning systems. That's the 80%. Now, one thing though that's important is that's today. Let's think about 30, 50 years from now, when the climate change impacts kick in even more, right? You're going up 2 degrees. The weather patterns are really changing. So what you'll see is this increasing trend of hazard.
With more frequency.
Yeah, more frequency. So it's today we're in one state. 20 years, 30 years from now, we're likely to be in another state of more frequency of these events.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So here we take another break.
Yeah.
And after the break, we will try to conclude and get the final conclusion, recommendation side we'll do.
Yeah.
And so please stay with us.
diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
Welcome back. So, David, what are your recommendations? Quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, for the policymaker and the general public, and especially I'm talking about this region,
Yeah.
which is India, Pakistan, Nepal,
Yeah.
Bhutan, and even
Yeah.
Bangladesh.
Yeah. So number one, disasters are increasing in frequency.
Right. That is an observation.
That's the observation. So given that, there are two pieces of that: how people interact with nature and the nature itself. So number one, do everything we can and recognize these are going to become more frequent. Do everything we can in our planning, stay away from the floodplains. That's what we talked about. Build stronger houses, schools, etc. Do that kind of planning. Number three is be better prepared. Use our science, our technology to better predict where and when these disasters will happen, the danger zones where you really shouldn't go and build places. And we can do that if we put our minds to it. The remote sensing technology is there. The communication technology is getting better and better all the time. So put a lot of effort in that. And then number four is just recognize it will happen, right? Sometimes it will happen. And there we have to strengthen the community to be able to respond, rebuild, after that does happen. So a lot of effort working with communities at that level, understanding, improving the networks they have both internally and externally.
So what
to
you're
respond
talking
to that.
about, it's new knowledge that should reach to the common people, at the level of the common people and the policymaker together. Do you think a very active programming need to be, and however small? I know limitations of organizations, it's a huge area. I mean, globally it's a big word. But do you think some active communication policy and should be adopted, especially designed for that?
I think there has to be huge awareness building, not just active, but really, and we heard that yesterday.
Because politically, if the awareness is there, I mean, they will support the government, they will elect government on these issues and all.
Yeah. So if the awareness, if people know that the disaster can be limited with better actions, if they realize that and they can take some action, certainly an awareness campaign, would prompt the leaders to really take action in these areas. So a lot of it is awareness and communication, indeed.
Yeah. David, thank you very much. And the conclusion is to understand and communicate. And obviously, these people are expert, have the organizational support, have a history to their benefit. And what right now they're doing is to communicate. And only thing we can do is to wish them well, because the disasters are very terrible. In one go, in couple of minutes, a disaster can wash away human life, livelihood, property, everything that you have, and bring you back to it can roll you back for 100 years or for a long time. So with this we come to the end of the program. Next time, next guest, next program. Keep watching our programs.